A group of 5 friends encounter an ancient Draisine while exploring an abandoned warehouse in a remote region. Fascinated by the find and the story of a deactivated railroad that runs through the nearby forest, they decide to venture along the tracks. The locals warn them about legends of a curse and mysterious disappearances, but curiosity overcomes fear. As night falls, the expedition transforms. The trails take them past a rusty bridge and signs marking old accident sites. The atmosphere is heavy and full of echoes of the past. As they advance, the group begins to encounter disturbing objects: stopped clocks showing the same time, children's shoes, and a diary drenched with disturbing entries about a disaster that occurred decades ago, leaving everyone uneasy and questioning their decision to proceed. Then, strange sounds and whispers begin to envelop the group. Shadows seem to watch them from the trees, disappearing whenever they try to look directly at them. The night becomes a dark corridor of fear and mystery, and small conflicts arise between them over whether to continue or turn back. But before they can decide, the Draisine unexpectedly stops, throwing them into an unsettling silence only broken by the whispers of the shadows. With the dress broken and one of the friends missing, the search becomes frantic. They come across more items scattered across the trails, and the diary, now dry and complete. The latest entries reveal the terror of a former driver whose trip ended in tragedy right there. As the truth unfolds, they realize they may be reliving that cursed night, trapped in a cycle of despair and death that the railroad hides. A violent storm breaks out, forcing them to seek shelter in an abandoned train station. Inside, as the wind howls and the rain beats on the roof, they discover that the place may not be as deserted as they imagined. Footsteps echo through the building, and shadows move through the fogged windows. Now the fight for survival is twofold: against the raging forces of nature and the dark secrets that the supposedly deserted train station hides. With the forest moving and night falling, the friends head into the dense forest. The adventure begins with laughter and stories, but the atmosphere changes as darkness envelops the scene. They pass old landmarks like a rusty bridge and railroad signs that mark old accident sites, adding to the tension in the air. As daylight disappears completely, the friends notice that the forest around them seems to take on a life of its own. Unexplained noises and the rustling of leaves make them jump. Every shadow seems to move, and every whisper of the wind carries almost human voices. The initial banter gives way to palpable tension. They begin to question what they really know about the railroad and its stories of unsolved disappearances and accidents. The objects found along the way begin to tell a story of their own. A broken pocket watch stopped exactly at midnight. A pair of children's shoes, as if the child had evaporated, leaving only that behind, and faded photographs of people who seemed to be watching their friends with dark eyes. Each discovery leaves the group more restless, filling the air with a growing sense of despair. When the Draisine abruptly stops, the silence that follows is almost deafening. The forest seems to hold its breath with them. The struggle to repair the vehicle under the dim light of flashlights is frantic but fruitless. The true nature of their situation begins to crystallize. They are alone, isolated and vulnerable, miles from any help. And then the sound of footsteps breaking branches nearby suggests that they may not be as alone as they thought. Finally, when the search for their missing friend leads them down a dark, narrow forest trail, every shadow becomes a threat. The forest is no longer just a backdrop to your adventure, but a living presence, observing and possibly manipulating your movements. They find the diary once again, open to a page that describes an old accident in the exact spot where they stopped. The text, written with frantic urgency, warns of a repeat tragedy, and they realize they may be about to relive the same horror. As the group progresses, they find strange objects along the tracks, stopped clocks showing the same time, children's shoes, and a wet diary. The now legible diary entries tell of a tragic event on the railroad decades ago that has never been fully explained. Reality and legends begin to intertwine. The objects appear strangely preserved, as if they had been left there recently despite their ancient origins. Clocks with frozen hands, shoes that still maintain the shape of the feet that wore them, and the diary, whose soaked pages reveal a narrative of despair and disappearance. The atmosphere thickens with each discovery, as if each item were a piece of a macabre puzzle, guiding them deeper into the mystery of the railroad. The diary becomes an object of fascination and terror. It contains entries from a passenger who describes the growing tension aboard a train destined never to reach its destination. She reports strange sounds outside the carriages and passengers disappearing one by one. Fear and paranoia spread among the passengers as they realized that something terribly wrong was happening on that fateful journey. Reading the reports, the group begins to hear noises that echo those described in the diary. Whispers among the trees, footsteps, following your own, shadows that seem to peek through the dense foliage. The barrier between past and present begins to crumble, making them question whether they are walking the path of a forgotten tragedy or simply reliving the terrors of yesteryear. The expedition through the abandoned railway turns into an investigation into past and lingering events. The friends find themselves trapped in a cycle of events that seems to repeat itself, as if the railroad is destined to relive its tragic history with each new visitor. Discovering each object and reading each page of the diary leads them to question not only the history of the railroad, but also the choices that brought them there. Unexplained sounds and whispers begin to surround the group. Shadowy figures are seen moving between the trees, disappearing before they are clearly seen. Fear sets in, and small conflicts arise between friends about whether to continue or return. The night advances, and the darkness becomes denser, increasing the fear that already surrounds them. Each step forward feels like an invitation into the unknown. The rustling of the wind through the leaves seems to carry hidden messages, while the figures skulking in the shadows begin to seem less like illusions and more like observing entities. Insecurity grows within the group, and fervent arguments arise, fueled by tension and fear of what is yet to come. In a moment of relative calm, as they try to decide the best course of action, a muffled scream breaks the silence of the forest, followed by the sound of something heavy dragging across the leafy ground. The terror intensifies, and the decision to return seems increasingly sensible, but curiosity and the desire to unravel the mysteries that the trails hide drive them to move forward despite the growing danger. Conflicts between them escalate as the path becomes more threatening. Accusations of irresponsibility and recklessness are thrown around, while the fear that the next step could be the last consumes them. They find themselves torn between group loyalty and survival instinct, every whisper and movement in the shadows testing their limits and their sanity. Finally, the pressure reaches a critical point when they come across a clearing where traces of ancient camps are evident, along with signs of forgotten rituals. Remnants of campfires, pieces of rope and strange marks on trees suggest that this place served as the setting for dark events. The reality of the danger becomes undeniable, and the decision to continue or not becomes a choice between confronting the horrors that await them or fleeing to save what's left of their sanity. Suddenly, the Draisine stops working. As they try to fix it, one of the friends disappears into the shadows. The search for him leads to even more disturbing discoveries about the fates of people who have ventured there before, suggesting that something more sinister inhabits the forest. With the Draisine's unexpected stop, the Group quickly organizes itself to look for their missing friend, calling his name through the dense fog that begins to form between the trees. Worry turns to dread as they find belongings scattered along the way. A cap, a broken flashlight, indicating a struggle or a hasty escape. Each new clue increases the tension as the forest seems to close in around them, its night sounds magnified by the harrowing silence of expectation. During their search, they stumble upon an old campsite, covered in moss and leaves, as if it hadn't been visited in years. Upon examining the site, they discover a diary partially buried underground, belonging to an adventurer who recorded his last entries in shaky, hurried handwriting. The words describe terrifying encounters with something he calls the guardians of the forest, beings who would not allow anyone to leave the trails alive. The diary leads the group to a hidden trail, marked by strange symbols on the trees, which seem to lead into the heart of the forest. Tentatively following the route, they find traces of ancient rituals and dolls made from branches hanging from trees, suggesting that the site is used for dark and possibly dangerous practices. The atmosphere becomes increasingly oppressive, the air thick with the sweet smell of decay as the group heads deeper into the unknown. The tension reaches its peak when they finally find their friend, disoriented and shaking, on the edge of a small lake that reflects the moonlight in an ominous way. He murmurs about being taken by shadows that move too fast to be human, and speaks of voices that whispered promises of freedom in exchange for something he couldn't understand. The reunion, although relieving, leaves the group with more questions than answers, and the decision to abandon the expedition becomes unanimous. However, the way back promises to be as dangerous as the journey that took them there, with the forest now awake and aware of their presence. They find the diary, again, now dry and complete. The last entries are frantic and tell of a former driver whose journey ended in disaster that same night. The group realizes that they may be reliving that cursed night. As they leaf through the last pages of the diary, they discover that the conductor wrote about a growing sense of despair and fear among the passengers who felt an evil presence stalking the train at night. The entries describe how headlights began to fail and terrifying sounds emanated from the surrounding trees, while dense fog swallowed the trails, making visibility almost nil. The diary details the train's final moments, when suddenly a deafening crash cut through the silence of the night, and the vehicle derailed. The conductor described scenes of chaos inside the carriages, with passengers screaming and running as they tried to escape something he could not see but only feel, as if the very air was permeated with terror and death. Continuing reading, they learned that the driver, in an act of desperation, tried to reunite the survivors, but as he went, he found only traces of unexplained violence and disappearances. He spoke of an unknown force that seemed to consume the lives and sanity of everyone who tried to flee, leaving behind only the echo of their voices in the darkness. The diary's last words are a grim warning to anyone following the same path. Avoid the tracks when night falls, for they lead nowhere except into the heart of an endless nightmare. With this terrifying revelation, the group finds themselves immersed not only in the story of an ancient tragedy, but also in the possibility that the past is about to repeat itself to them. The determination to find a way out and avoid the fate of the train passengers becomes more urgent than ever. A violent storm breaks out, and they are forced to seek shelter in a seemingly abandoned train station. Inside, they face not only the fury of time, but also the secrets that the station hides. Echoes of footsteps and menacing shadows suggest that the place may have more presences than them. The night becomes a fight for survival against both natural and supernatural forces. As soon as they enter, the old train station reveals its forgotten, time-worn character. Broken windows let heavy rain in, creating puddles on the wooden floor that creaks under your steps. The wind whistles through the cracks, carrying with it almost human whispers that seem to come from the shadows, moving just at the edge of your vision. They feel a chill that is not just caused by the cold, but by the feeling that something or someone is watching them, hidden in the darkness. As the storm rages outside, they explore the interior of the station, finding signs that the place is not as abandoned as they imagined. Personal objects, an old lantern still with some oil on it, and newspapers dated years ago but strangely well preserved, indicate that someone was there recently. With each door they open, or corridor, they investigate. The echo of their own footsteps seems to be accompanied by another set, always a fraction of a second behind. The tension grows when they discover a locked room. After some effort, they manage to open the door, revealing a small office covered in maps and notes that appear to study and record movements and events on the railroad. In the center, a large wooden table holds an open diary, the pages marked by a railroad map with various areas circled in red and notes about mysterious sightings and disappearances. As the night progresses, they realize that the station could be a central point for understanding the mysteries of the railroad. However, with every minute that passes, the feeling that they are not alone only intensifies. Shadows stir at the edges of its light, and inexplicable sounds suggest furtive movements. Each flash of lightning that illuminates the sky briefly reveals distorted figures through the window, disappearing as quickly as they appear. Now, the struggle is not only to survive the storm, but also to maintain sanity in the face of the unexplainable and terrifying. As the night deepens, the storm reaches its peak, with thunder that shakes the foundations of the old train station. Inside the trembling structure, the group huddles together, wrapped in blankets found in a dusty closet. Flickering candlelight casts dancing shadows on the walls, transforming every corner into a spectacle of menacing shapes that seem to take on a life of their own. The atmosphere is filled with palpable terror as whispers and footsteps continue to echo through the empty corridors, getting closer and closer, more and more real. Faced with the reality that something or someone definitely inhabits the station beyond them, the group struggles between the desire to escape and the need to discover more about the mysteries that the railway and the station hold. Curiosity is a fire that cannot be easily extinguished, even in the face of danger. However, the option of leaving becomes less and less viable as the storm intensifies, blocking all escape routes with floods and debris carried by the violent wind. As they discuss their next move, a dull boom and a flash of lightning illuminate the main room, briefly revealing the silhouette of a figure in the opposite doorway, as quick to appear as to disappear. Each group member's heart races, breathing becomes labored. The reality of their situation sets in deeply. They are trapped, not only by the storm, but also by forces they do not understand and cannot see clearly. Determined to face whatever is haunting the station, they arm themselves with whatever they can find, loose pieces of wood, rusty tools, and head towards the heart of the station. Each step is accompanied by a mix of fear and determination. The sound of your own footsteps reverberates in the silence between the thunder, a rhythmic march towards the unknown. As they approach the end of the hallway, where the figure was last seen, an icy wind blows through the broken windows, extinguishing the candles and plunging everything into darkness. The whispers intensify, almost as if they are calling your names. Hesitantly, they stop at the door, shaking hands ready to push it open. With a collective deep breath, they push open the door, only to find an empty room, with the sound of the storm roaring like a monster outside. The light of lightning illuminates the space again, revealing not the end, but rather the promise of more. Mysteries and stories hidden in the darkness. And so, the search for knowledge and truth continues as the night advances tirelessly. As the storm rages outside, the friends push open the door at the end of the hall, their hearts beating in unison with the distant thunder. The room, lit by a passing flash of lightning, reveals walls covered in old newspaper clippings and faded photographs, each showing different groups of people standing in front of the same station over the years. In the center, a table with a large open book, its pages full of names and dates, some crossed in red. The light disappears as quickly as it appears, and the group is left in the dark, listening to the wind whistling through the cracks, bringing with it a cold that penetrates the bones. Cautiously, they turn on a flashlight, illuminating the book again. There's something disturbingly familiar about the crossed names, and a feeling of urgency washes over them. They decide to take the book with them, hoping that at dawn, the light will bring answers and no more shadows. As they prepare to leave the station, they can't help but feel that their own names may already be etched into the pages of time, part of a story bigger and darker than they imagined.